Hello, everyone. This is the May version of the Charleston chapter of the Financial Executive Networking Group. And today we have Brad White here to speak to us about QuickBase. Brad, why don't you take it away?
Fantastic. So first off, just thanks for inviting me to be part of your group meeting. I've done a few of these so far, and it's always a fun time meeting new folks and really talking about stuff that I'm pretty passionate about, which is QuickBase as well as QuickBooks. A little bit of background on me, just real briefly. I'm the owner and CEO of VARC Solutions. We've been around for about 25 plus years. We're actually based out of Houston. We're in the Friendswood area, which is just kind of South Houston. But we have clients nationwide, and we do two primary things. We help people with QuickBooks, and we help people with QuickBase. So, if you leave with only one thing, knowledge about me at all, at least, and that's if you're looking for like somebody who's a QuickBooks expert, that's what our company does. We do bookkeeping, consulting, training, cleanups, file reviews, a lot of the stuff that CFOs don't really want to do in terms of the day-to-day types of bookkeeping. We do that kind of stuff. But we also do sort of the harder stuff. If someone was trying, for example, to migrate from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online, that's kind of messy a lot of times, and so we do that kind of work. And just in a traditional small businesses, a lot of times there's somebody that's doing that work, and sometimes they don't know as much about the software or accounting as maybe they should or could. And so a lot of times we're getting involved in really just helping with cleanup. We actually work with quite a few CFOs, controllers, owners that for one reason or another are looking to outsource part of that work, and we do as much or as little as somebody might need. If it's QuickBooks, we pretty much do it. We're not a CPA firm, we're not a tax firm. Those are the only two things that we really don't do, but everything else we do in terms of QuickBooks. And then interestingly enough, I mean, this topic is actually about QuickBase, and I'm going to talk about how those two things kind of can connect and how they're interrelated. But the other half of what we do as a company is we build solutions on the QuickBase low-code platform. And so part of what I'll be talking about today, obviously, is what in the world is QuickBase? What does it do? What can it do? And ultimately why it might be something you could consider potentially in your own business, but also just with the folks that you guys are consulting with, advising. There may be opportunities down the road for that kind of thing. And we've got referral partner programs and all sorts of things that are beneficial for everybody. So that's just a little bit of background. Let me go ahead and just dive into the presentation. And really, also, if you have questions at any time, feel free to interrupt me, raise your hand, put it in chat, and Scott and the team will let me know if there's questions that I can address for you. But I'm very fine with you interrupting what I'm in the middle of talking about, because I know that if there's something on your mind, I want to make sure and address that. So part of what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you the background, kind of like what is QuickBase, what is it trying to solve, and then I'll actually do a demo of QuickBase so you can kind of see it, feel it, touch it, so to speak. Because I think that's the hard part of any software program is like, well, okay, yeah, I know you said it's really cool, but like, what does it actually do, or what does it actually look like? So let's go ahead and get started. So first off, the problem. Okay, what is the problem that tends to lead to somebody even looking at QuickBase as a solution? Number one, it's feeling like you're outgrowing some other software program that you're currently using. Okay, since a lot of what we do starts with QuickBooks as the accounting platform, that's the kind of thing that we occasionally have people telling us is, hey, they feel like they're outgrowing QuickBooks. They feel like they're outgrowing the QuickBooks accounting software. And that may or may not be true, but typically when we hear that, it's not so much the accounting system that is being outgrown. It's the business complexity. It's the business processes that I'm trying to manage. It's all these interrelated systems that I'm trying to do different things, and it's just not working anymore. And so I feel like I have to get rid of QuickBooks and migrate to some other very, very large and oftentimes much more expensive and robust solution. And And that's not always what we recommend. In fact, most of the time we don't recommend people just sort of get rid of QuickBooks and instead migrate to something like NetSuite or something like that, because we're talking about multiples of difference in terms of cost and complexity and time it takes to implement, successive implementation, and all those types of things. And so just the summary for this particular slide, if you will, is if you feel like you're outgrowing QuickBooks, it's very likely that you're not outgrowing the accounting system itself. It's all those other things that you're trying to do in your business that are becoming really, really complicated because you're growing and you're scaling and you're needing a solution ultimately. Okay. So give you a couple examples of what I mean by that. So we work with lots of companies, different industries. One that we've worked with in the past is a vehicle wrapping business. Okay. So I've got customers coming in, they're bringing their cars, their trucks, their vans, and they want those vehicles wrapped. Okay. Well, if all I was doing was putting in an estimate or an invoice in QuickBooks and sending it out and getting paid, QuickBooks can do that all day long. That's really not that hard. But what happens is I'm in a business like a vehicle wrapping business, and I want to be able to manage my sales pipeline. Who are the people that have called me and said, I'm interested in the service? And then I want to be able to do estimates. I want to be able to do invoices, but I've also got this design phase. Somebody signs up for my service. I need to give them a form. They have to submit artwork to me. It has to go through a design approval. And then I need to be able to get approvals on that, hand it over to my project team, and then have them go print, apply, QC, and I want to manage that entire process in one system. Okay, now we're talking about something that QuickBooks doesn't do by itself. Okay, so that project management layer, that approval, design, the phases of work, those are the types of things that lend themselves to a more robust system like QuickBase versus just purely trying to do things in your accounting system, which is oftentimes not the right way of thinking of QuickBooks. In other words, QuickBooks is pretty much just the accounting system, if you can think of it that way. Okay. So here are some of the challenges. Here's some of the things that people talk to us about as it relates to the exploration of these types of solutions. Number one, it's very likely if you've been around if you're in a business and you've been around for 10, 15 years, you probably have a number of different systems that you're using. And sometimes your business is so unique that you've gone out and hired somebody to go build a custom system. Okay. And again, that's not necessarily in and of itself a bad thing. You oftentimes need custom software to do certain things in your business because of how unique it is what you do. The challenge, though, comes in when you've gone out and paid a developer to go build something that's super highly proprietary for your business, and then that person decides at some point in the future they don't want to develop on it anymore. They don't want to keep updating it anymore. They want to retire at some point. And now you're stuck with the software that nobody knows how to update. Nobody can take over the development for, or they're going to have to literally spend months trying to learn it and figure it out. And that's going to be very, very costly. Okay. That's a very common scenario that QuickBase is a great alternative for because it's a low code platform. And I'll explain what that means. A second problem, though, that we see again is, I've gone out and talked with different solution providers that offer, canned solutions for maybe a specific industry. Okay, you're a construction company. You go out and buy this construction software, and the people that are selling it are saying, hey, it's amazing. It can do all these different things, and you're like, oh, this sounds great. And oftentimes it is great, right? And then you start using it and you're like, well, here's the thing. In our business, we only do 3 out of these things that it can do. And it's got 20 things on the screen, and it becomes really, really hard to find what you're looking for because there's so many things. Okay. The system can oftentimes have all these different bells and whistles that you don't need that just sort of clutter up the system. Okay. So instead, you could actually go build a system on the QuickBase platform and have it give you just what you needed, nothing extra, nothing special, just what you need. And ultimately, you're going to be providing a better system for your users that don't have to navigate this complex system. They can just get in and do what they need and be on their way. Okay, so that's an example of some of the things that we talk about. Here's another problem that we see with software that you're kind of buying off the shelf, and you're buying it from a software as a service type of company, and they have a solution that you've purchased, right? The challenge with that is if you've bought a solution that somebody else has built, somebody else owns, and they are ultimately in charge of the features and the design, what it can, what it can't do. If you say to yourself, this system is great, but I wish it could do these other things that I need it to do, um, you're at their mercy, right? You have to submit a request and say, hey, could you please possibly, add this feature to this software that we think is great. And what you'll oftentimes hear is, hey, that's great. We'll add that to the product roadmap. We'll add it to the feature list request. And at some point, that might get prioritized and get implemented for all of our clients, not just you, but all of our clients that use that software. Anytime I hear somebody say that we're adding a feature to a product roadmap, what I tell myself is it's probably not going to happen. So that's just what I've experienced in my career is it may happen. It may happen a year from now. It might happen 3 years from now, or it might not ever happen. And by the way, I say the same thing about QuickBooks. We love QuickBooks. It's the accounting system that we use every day. But if I call into it up and say, hey, I don't like this part of your software, can you change it? They're going to say, thank you for the feedback. And they're just waiting to see if another million people in America will feel the same way and share that same feedback. And then they might consider changing something. Okay. So ultimately, what you need is a system that you own, okay, that adapts to your needs on your schedule when you want it, and ultimately, that's something that QuickBase can do for you. Okay. A couple more last things, and again, we'll kind of go into the next steps, which is I know a lot of people in the financial industry love Excel, love Google Sheets, right? And I do too. I mean, Excel's a pretty magical tool, and you guys use it all the time, I know. But it's not a system, right? It's a spreadsheet, right? You can do magical formulas in there. You can do pivot tables. You can do macros. You can do a lot of cool stuff. But it's not a system, and it's not that great for collaboration. Like if you've got 5 people on a team or different departments that need to access that data that's on that spreadsheet, you end up, sending copies of it, or, adding copies of sheets and copies of workbooks, and it's really kind of, it ultimately becomes very, very hard to manage. We have clients that reach out to us for help wanting to build a QuickBase system, and usually what they're coming to us with is a very, very complicated spreadsheet that they've been trying to manage everything in. And it's at the beginning, it's fine, right? It'll work great. But there's going to be a point when you're just literally maxing out Excel, and you just can't get one more drop of benefit out of it. That's about the time when you're going to start looking for alternatives. And again, my suggestion to you is consider QuickBase, because I think it does everything Excel could do, but a whole lot more. And it's much better in terms of team and collaboration and management and leadership visibility kind of stuff. And we'll talk about it. Okay. I'm going to skip through a couple more, just kind of give you a couple of use case examples. We work with a number of different clients. Some are in land, commercial property development. And again, what does your accounting system do versus what something like a QuickBase could do? Well, most systems do have the ability to do estimates, do invoices, maybe purchase orders for materials, enter bills, pay bills, just the basic type of stuff there. But when you start getting into industry specific types of scenarios where I'm trying to manage a process, I need to go out and get permits before I can go out and hire the developers and the GCs and all those folks to go out and go do the work, and I've got to manage those phases of development. And then I've got to turn this thing that I've been working on for a year and a half into this thing that I'm going to then put on the market and sell. Whatever those things are, you need a system that's very, very adaptable and can change as your business changes. I guarantee, I mean, I don't know each of you individually, but I can guarantee you, no matter what business you're in, things are changing. Okay. You're never going to be sitting there in this static environment where you just keep doing the same things every day, all day, no changes. And so the systems that you use to solve business problems have to be adaptable to you in your business versus the other way around. Like, we don't ever want to get in a situation where your business is changing, but the software that you're using can't change with you. And so, because that ultimately limits your ability to scale, and we don't like that. Okay. Um, so I'm just going to go through a couple different examples. We work with a number of different companies that, they're not just providing services, they're also maybe providing materials or supplies. A number of companies that do things like rental or equipment rental, tool rental. Things are getting checked out, things are getting checked back in. You've got companies that do field service management where I've got an inventory that I need to know it's on this truck, and I need to be able to assign that truck to a specific technician, and they're going to go out, do this work, use some of the materials, come back to the office or the warehouse and unload. Those processes and the types of things you're trying to track in there get really, really hard. And so that's where you start looking for a really, really good solution. So kind of the summary of all these types of things that I'm giving you as context is, first and foremost, hey, if you're in an industry and there is a cookie cutter software out there that is a perfect fit, by all means use it. It'll probably be less expensive than choosing something like QuickBase or NetSuite or some other more expensive solution. If there's a perfect fit, use it. But if you're in an industry where things aren't a perfect fit, then that's when you need something that's a little bit more adaptable. And quite frankly, I've worked with small and medium-sized companies and owners for the better part of the last 25 years, and I've yet to see and meet a business owner that didn't do it differently than everybody else. I mean, I could meet 10 plumbers and I could talk to every single one of them, and they're probably running their business different. The teams and how they manage those teams are different. The types of products and solutions that they provide are different. It's just always different. Okay. But again, if I've got a buddy that's in the pool chemical servicing business, and he's got a perfect fit solution that does just that thing, and it does it incredibly well, and it's very inexpensive. Great, use it. But as soon as you start needing all the other things that are more of exceptions, then we can talk. So low code platforms. A lot of people don't even know what that really means, and so I want to define what low code platform is. So here's what QuickBase is. QuickBase is a low code cloud-based platform that can be built to solve a whole number of problems, build systems and processes and automations to serve your business. But when it says low code, all that really means is you're not hiring a programmer that's going to go out and write 10,000 lines of code to do something that you need it to do. Okay. Instead, you're going to use a more visual-based system where you as a non-developer, you as a non-database expert, you as a non-IT expert can go in and you can actually use the system and build on that system. You don't have to have some developer that graduated with an MIS degree or a CS degree that knows 10 different programming languages. You don't need somebody like that for QuickBase because it's a low code platform. Okay. The good news is QuickBase has been around for a long time. A lot of people haven't heard about it, but it's been around since 1999. Originally developed by Intuit, which is the same company that made QuickBooks, originally created Quicken for personal finances, TurboTax, and a couple other professional level tax software programs. So it was started at, if you will, by Intuit, and then spun off as a separate company in 2016, and it's been growing and growing and going ever since. Where we come in as a company, VARC Solutions, is we are a QuickBase partner, which is a fancy way of saying if somebody needed if they wanted to outsource the building and the development of the solution, we've got developers on our team that do that. And we're also a QuickBooks solution provider as well. So it just means we do everything related to QuickBooks as well. So I want to give you a couple little bits, little last bits of context before we kind of jump into demo mode. And I just want to let you know, yeah, there's other solutions out there. QuickBase is not always the best fit. I think it's a great fit in a lot of cases, but probably the best alternative, if you will, to QuickBase that you probably all have heard of is Salesforce. Salesforce has been around a long time as well, incredibly robust, can do a lot of things. And if you're in an enterprise level company, you've got 5,000 employees, 20,000 employees, and up. Salesforce is fantastic. Okay, it's great. It's also very expensive, a little bit harder to maintain. In other words, you still need an IT department for the most part to go build solutions and have things integrated. NetSuite is another one that a lot of people have heard of, especially when you start going into mid-market and upwards, where you're looking for this robust ERP system. NetSuite is one that we hear about pretty frequently. But again, the challenge with NetSuite is it is very costly to own, okay? And it also takes a long time to implement. And by the way, I'm saying that in context of QuickBooks, in context of QuickBase as alternatives, because when we talk to people about QuickBooks and their accounting system, and they say, "Hey, I'm outgrowing QuickBooks. I think I need NetSuite," we discourage that as a next step. And the reason why is because people who are used to spending $2,000 or $3,000 a year on an accounting system, who are able to also get up and running with that accounting system within a matter of weeks, there's just a complete shock to the system when you start thinking about NetSuite. NetSuite, from our experience, takes over a year to implement, over $100,000, not just in terms of annual cost, but also maintenance cost. And most of the folks that we hear that chose NetSuite, implemented NetSuite, about a year and a half into it, they're wishing they had not done that. And they've wasted a lot of time and they wasted a lot of money. And ultimately, the salespeople are out there selling it, are saying it can do everything and it's amazing. And yes, it can do a lot of things, but it's also just very, very complex. It's very, very hard to implement. And so that's when people sort of call us back and say, "Hey, what else could we have done instead?" And that's when we start talking about QuickBase. Okay. And before I go too deep into this, I also want to explain that QuickBase is not a cookie cutter system. All this stuff that I've got on my screen is something that I built or our team built for this very specific demo or this very specific use case. Your QuickBase can look dramatically different. And if you took 20 of our clients and put their QuickBase applications side by side, you would be, okay, I see some similar structures, but what we've done or what they've done with their apps, it can be very, very different. Okay, so I don't want you to look at this and go, okay, that's QuickBase and that's all it can be. It really can be anything that you vision or have a vision for. This is just a platform upon which to build. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a couple different things. First off is just dashboards in general and what I call actionable KPIs. Okay, what we've done on this particular master dashboard is we've said there's certain things within the business that are happening every single day, and I want to know more about those at a very, very high level. Okay. So we built a dashboard to tell us, hey, how many active clients or active customers do we have in our system right now? We can also use it to bring to light things that are maybe problems or opportunities. Hey, I want to know clients with no timesheets in the last 90 days. Well, I've got a number there. I want to know how many projects are ready to invoice. So those are just 3 specific examples that we built with this demo. But the key is it's visualizing data behind the scenes. And if I want more detail, I can click into it. And now I'm going to be able to see those 100 active customers just by clicking into it and just waiting for the report to refresh. And now there's all those clients. I've got the phone numbers. I've got the email addresses. I've got some other details that I wanted to track on that report. Okay. And so the point being is those dashboards are visualizing data that's behind the scenes, but it's also incredibly accessible. I can just click through it, drill down, if you will, into that number, and I can see the underlying detail. Okay. I can also use use QuickBase to manage sales pipelines. There's a lot of different sales pipeline management solutions out there, but if you're going to use QuickBase for these other 3 things, why not build that sales pipeline into the QuickBase as well? And so, give you an example, we've built a sales dashboard in our demo, and we again want to visualize what's our sales funnel look like. Okay, I want to know how many open proposals we've got. I want to know how many prospects are in our system that are missing proposals. I want to visualize that funnel. Okay. And so this is a native report that is built into QuickBase. And all I have to do is tell it what are those categories that I want to visualize. Okay. So if I want to drill down into the closed one, I could just hover over that and it tells me how many that are there, and I can drill down into that. Okay. We can also build workflow management. In other words, like if we were working with a client and they said, hey, we've got this process that we go through in our system, I might want to do an actionable KPI that kind of gives me just data points along the way. How many proposals are in this phase? How many projects are in this phase? Okay, that's great. But I also might develop a workflow where, for example, I might say, how many proposals are ready to be sent? How many proposals need approval? How many approved proposals need to be turned into a project? So this is a step-by-step type of workflow where once it gets done here, it goes to the next step, and then I want to see it here. And then it goes to the next step, and I want to see it here. Okay. I'll give you a perfect example. We use QuickBase, and by the way, we use it every single day to run our business, but I might be tracking time related to the projects that we're working on, okay? Well, in our system, timesheets flow in, they have to get approved, reviewed and approved, and then after they've been approved, then I can flow them into our accounting system for payroll, for client invoicing, those next steps, okay? So notice I've got 42 timesheets needing to be approved, and I've got 3 that have already been approved. Well, if I click through to that, and let's say I've also kind of built out some really cool automations to just give me a button that I can click on to approve a timesheet. Okay, I can click that button. Behind the scenes, it's marking it as approved. It's putting who approved it and the date. Okay, and when I come back to my dashboard and reload the page, instead of saying 42 and 3, it should say 41 and 4. Okay, so you can see underlying detail, things moved. I've built automations and workflows to help me visualize where things are at in that process. Okay. 2 other things that I'll highlight related to dashboards, and the reason why I'm highlighting, by the way, is because they're valuable and super simple at the end of the day. Okay. I don't know about you, but in our business, people make mistakes. Okay. Whether it's a bookkeeper that makes a mistake, whether it's a salesperson that makes a mistake. And when I say mistakes, I'm saying like, hey, somebody turned in an estimate that doesn't have the quantity filled in. Okay. Or I've got an invoice, but the PO number was left off. Those types of mistakes happen because people are moving fast. Maybe you don't have that review process internally to QC that stuff. People overlook things. It's just a fact of reality. Okay. So what we typically do when we build applications for clients is we build data cleanup dashboards as well. And so I'll give you an example of what that might look like. So we always label these as should be zeros. Okay. So in other words, the goal is to not get this to 100 or this number to 1,000. These numbers should all be zero if the data is clean. Okay. So good example. I've got projects, but they're missing a manager. Every project in our company should have a project manager. Okay. So these are ones where a project was created. Maybe it's actually already in process, but we forgot to put the project manager name on it. Okay. Or I've got timesheets that are missing a duration. Maybe it's got the start time, but it didn't have the end time. So there's no duration or total. Again, those are things that could be mistakes. They could just be oversights. They could be just neglect, or hey, there's a process and something didn't get done. Okay. So those data cleanup dashboards can really help when you've got tons and tons of moving parts and you're just not sure if things are getting done. You could build a KPI dashboard, put a report or a filter on there to say, hey, I'm looking for these things that are falling through the cracks, and visualize those so you can help manage that and make sure that the data is clean. Okay. Last thing I'm going to talk about dashboards. And I'm going to set the context for this one in terms of team management. Okay. And again, I tend to go back to myself because I think, I'm just one example of how, somebody might be trying to run a business. But if I've got a sales team, or I've got a project management team, or I've got an engineering team, or a development team, or a construction team, whatever those things are, a franchise operations team, I need to know who's doing what. And I need to know things about workflow, workload. I wouldn't want to have a scenario where I've got a sales team and Adam has got 300 open activities and somebody else has 2. Okay. That's a very unbalanced scenario. So I could use a dashboard like this to say, hey, Casey's got more projects that are open than Jacob. Hey, Casey, could Jacob take a few of those? Okay. Or or if this was a sales dashboard, and these people are out going and hunting and killing, so to speak, their sales, these numbers could be good if they're bigger, right? So I can use this to visualize where things are at and help me manage a team versus just, having a team check in and have them say everything's going great. Okay. I want to visualize what that means. Okay. All right. So that's my big picture sort of sales pitch, if you will, on dashboards. And again, this is just an example of how those could work. But you can also add graphs and charts and pie charts and all sorts of other things on these dashboards too. So it doesn't have to be all, blocks and greens and reds. Okay. So let me dive into the next part of the demo and talk about just like a sample client. So not every Quickbase application has a client or a customer or anything like that. It could be that you're managing equipment. It could be that you're managing employees with an HR system. Okay. But the sample that I've got here or the example that I'm using for this demo is just a sample client. Okay. What I want you to see, because there's a lot of things that you could be focused on the screen, what I want you to see is we have a table, okay, and we happen to have called this table clients, okay. For you, it could be vendors, it could be employees, it could be equipment, it could be invoices, it could be whatever data that you're trying to track. In that table, you're going to have fields of data. These are the things that you're trying to track. When we talk about the difference between a cookie cutter software program that you buy off the shelf and something like Quickbase, is a lot of times those cookie cutter software programs, they give you the fields and say, you must use these fields. Okay. And if you said, hey, I want to add a custom field, they would say, I'm sorry, these are the fields that we have given you. Okay. Well, what if I had a client list and I wanted to know where that client came from, like a marketing lead source? Well, if that field didn't exist, I could literally go into this form and I could add a field before this, or I could add a field after this. Or in this case, marketing lead source, you see how there's a drop-down list? And I could say, hey, I want to, this client came to me from a LinkedIn ad, they came from a campaign call, what have you. What if I wanted to change this list? Do I have to call somebody in IT to go add that entry? Well, the fact of the matter is, no, I don't. So for example, I can just right click and open up this field. And by the way, yes, you can put restrictions on this and only allow certain people to be able to make these kind of edits. There's a very robust roles and permissions structure behind the scenes that you can add or adapt. But in this case, I'm an admin, so I can do this. And I've given it a name. I've given it the types of things that I want to be in that drop-down list. And I can even check a box that says I want to allow users to add new choices. Like if I didn't want to restrict things super, super tightly, I could allow users to add their own choices based on their conversations with these clients. And now when I click save, and instead of just seeing a static list, now I've got an option down here at the bottom as a user where I can go add the stuff on the fly and I never have to call IT to do it. Okay. Once that option is turned on, I can do it. Okay. Here's a couple other things which I think might get you guys especially interested, and that's let's say in addition to just the basic customer information, I might want to have multiple contacts. In QuickBooks, you can actually only have one contact per client, one contact per vendor, unless you're going to use a notes field or something like that. So just simply the ability to have multiple contacts for a given client, that can be built into the system quite easily. We can track proposals, we can track projects, timesheets, income, invoices, things like that. But what I wanted to highlight here is the power of a cloud relational database, which is basically what QuickBase is. All these pieces are connected. So if I've got a client, okay, and I am recording invoices in QuickBase for that client, those things can be connected. And if they're connected, I can use the data on both sides. And I'll give you an example. In this demo app, we've got Jim's Family Store, and I'm tracking the invoices or income that I'm doing for this client. Okay. And you can see these are individual records for all these different invoices. And if you follow the total down to the bottom, you see how it's 72,611. Okay. That's the total of all those invoices. Well, all of these invoices are in a subtable that happens to be related back to that client. Okay. And because these are child records, so to speak, of that client, I can also roll the totals up to the client level and basically get a little mini P&L. So see how it's the total was 72,611. Well, I can actually roll that data up to the client level and I can see my total invoiced amount right there. If I'm tracking expenses, I could roll those expenses up to the client level and I could see not just invoice, but I could see total expenses. And again, if I wanted to, income minus expenses, I can get a little mini net income, a little mini P&L that I can, very quickly have accessible without having to dive into the detail to see the underlying specific invoices or specific expenses. I can roll that stuff up to the top layer. Okay. All right. So that's a little bit about just the data structure and how I can have tables and subtables and fields and things like that. What I also wanted to show you is some automations and some workflows that you can do. Okay. So I'm going to pull up a sample proposal just to kind of show you how this could potentially work for you. And the concept that I want to get across here is in your business, you have things that you do, right? You've got products that you're selling, you've got services that you're providing, and very often there is a workflow that you're going to go through. Okay. Client's going to come in the door. We're going to have them sign a client agreement. Then we're going to have an onboarding process. And then we're going to have this thing that happens next. Okay. Well, the same thing in this demo app, we might have a situation where we're going to develop a proposal or an estimate. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to fill out the proposal details. Just add them one at a time until we've got all the details in there. Well, after we do that, we then want to print and then send that proposal. So we might have step 2, where we want to take the details and generate a proposal PDF that we could then email out to that client. Okay. Or, by the way, some of our more elaborate solutions that we build integrate DocuSign. So it's creating a DocuSign agreement, sending it out automatically, and then returning the DocuSign once it's executed, and grabbing the details and populating the database. We can do that too. Okay. But let's assume we're filling out the details. We're generating the proposal. Once that proposal is created, we then want to send it from QuickBase directly to the client. And here's where I think QuickBooks as an accounting system starts falling short, is there's not really an elaborate approval process. I can send it out and I can get paid, but what if there's an approval process that has to happen before we can send this out or before we can start our project? Okay. Well, we can build an approval process where it can be very simple, it could be very elaborate, but all I'm really interested in is when was it approved and who approved it? Okay, so we can track those types of details. And then once it's approved, we then want to flow it into projects. And then once that project is done, we want to then flow it into an invoicing step. Okay. What we've tried to do using these tabs is try to visualize for a user what that workflow is like versus trying to convolute it and hide it and put things all over the place. We just want to literally kind of dumb it down and say, here's the process. You do these steps. And if you do these steps, everything's going to be great. Okay. All right. Last thing I want to show you. Last thing I want to show you is really just like a sample project and some of the automation capabilities that you get with QuickBase or that you could build in to a QuickBase solution. And really, the sky is the limit when it comes to automations. The sky is the limit when it comes to some of the integrations with QuickBase as a platform. But I'm going to give you an example. Whether you're a home flipper, okay, or a home builder, or residential construction, or commercial construction, or any other, industry out there, if you're the type of business that is scaling, it probably means you're doing some things over and over and over and over again. Like you're masters of this process and you're implementing that process and charging clients for that process. Okay. Okay. Well, you might have what we might call a turnkey project, where instead of you having to go manually, copy a spreadsheet or copy and paste in a list of activities every time you do something, you could build in a template task list into the system like QuickBase, click and have a little button that you click on that once you click on that turnkey project button, behind the scenes, it's actually automatically importing that template-based checklist, punch list, task list, whatever you want to call it, and populating that activity table. Okay. You see how before it was completely empty? Now, after I click that button, it's pre-populated the entire task list that I need to go work that project. Okay. And very similar to how you might like working in Excel, one of the cool things about Excel is you don't have to edit one record at a time, right? You can copy and paste. You can do all sorts of more batch type of things. Well, you can also, in QuickBase terminology, grid edit. Grid edit is kind of like the equivalent of using Excel, in that I could come in here and say, okay, I want to assign somebody to that task. Okay. And I could pick their name from a drop-down list. Okay. Well, I can also copy and paste that name. I could select multiple things and paste it down. I could even fill it down. If I had this top here, let's see, with that, and fill it down and have all the rows populate with that data, etc. That's an example of how, you can do that same kind of thing in Excel. You can do that same thing in QuickBase. Okay. There are people that use QuickBase plus another full-blown ERP. There are people that use QuickBase as their ERP. Okay, so it really depends on your tech stack and what you're doing. But just to give you an example, in terms of integration capability, okay, whether you're using QuickBase as your standalone, complete, all-inclusive solution, or if you're using various systems and you're trying to flow things from one system into another system or vice versa, that stuff is possible because, and I'll go back to PowerPoint here just for a second, and I want to pull up one slide to kind of dramatize what I'm trying to talk about. Yep, right here. QuickBase has an open API. Okay, that's a fancy way of saying it allows other systems to talk to it. Okay, Salesforce has an open API. Okay, Oracle has an open API. Gmail has an open API. DocuSign, G Suite, Mailchimp, SharePoint, you name it. All of those big systems, they have what are called an open API that, again, it's a fancy way of saying developers can build connections between the two. Okay, so even if you're using SharePoint, even if you're using Dropbox or Box.com for document storage or Amazon S3 for document storage, that stuff can be integrated directly with QuickBase. And it also has connections with a couple different workflow automation solutions. Some of you may be familiar with Zapier. Some of you may be familiar with Workato. And those are integration platforms that allow you to connect one thing to another thing, even if somebody hasn't gone out and specifically built like a direct connection between two things. Give an example. Let's say you had a website form that somebody was filling out, a contact us form, an opt-in form, whatever it might be, a marketing form, and you wanted to have that form populate a database like QuickBase. Okay, it's very possible that somebody has gone out and built a WordPress QuickBase connection. Okay, but if somebody hadn't built that direct connection between two systems, you could use Zapier or Workato to connect those systems because those systems kind of sit in the middle. And as long as that WordPress site can connect with Zapier, and as long as QuickBase can connect with Zapier, you can connect the two. Zapier is that middleware that allows you to connect these disparate systems. Zapier and Workato, literally both have tens of thousands of things that they integrate with. And the good news is QuickBase connects with Zapier and it connects with Workato. So through those platforms, you can pretty much connect to almost anything out there. Now, the last thing I'll say about the integrations, and this is again where we as a company are a little bit unique, I think, just in the marketplace, is we're QuickBase experts, but we're also QuickBooks experts. And we actually like using both. In our system, we use QuickBooks for our accounting, and we use QuickBase to run everything else in our business, right? Well, we've connected QuickBase Desktop with QuickBase using a tool that we actually built to make that direct connection. It's called Q2Q Connect. So if somebody was trying to, for example, use QuickBase for a more robust process management of estimating, invoicing, project management, job costing, all those different types of things. But I still needed that underlying invoice data to get into QuickBooks so that I can run a P&L. You could use our tool called Q2Q Connect to connect those two systems to have that data flow from QuickBase to QuickBooks and still get the accounting data in the accounting system that you need for financials. We are also QuickBooks Online experts. The Q2Q Connect tool that we built is specifically for QuickBooks Desktop, but we've also built integrations between QuickBase and QuickBooks Online. It's a different types of connection because they're both cloud systems, but same concept, right? It's like I want to be able to connect both systems, and I can do that. So, yes, I think the very long-winded and apologetic answer to your question is, yeah, QuickBase can be used with these different systems, and a lot of times it just matters, what are those two systems, and is there some sort of either direct connection, or is there some sort of middleware that allows us to connect the two?
Can you connect with Excel?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, is it a direct connection or could it be something else? So for example, there's a number of different tools out there that allow you to use ODBC types of connections. So if you've got Excel on a network or Excel on a desktop, there may be an ODBC connection, which would allow us to flow data in there. Since QuickBase is a natively cloud system, Google Sheets is probably a more typical example of how I might want to connect, because Google Sheets is also in the cloud, and so there's just a native integration between those two. So again, a lot of times the answer is it depends, but it just, when you get into the details, there's always a solution.
Brad, when you were doing, you were talking about approvals.
Yep.
When you were doing the demo.
Mhm.
Are those done within the system, or can you do it through email? Do you get emails that tell you that you have a task that you have to approve? How's that all work?
The short answer is it works however you would like it to work. And so the example that I'll give you, let me go back to that sample proposal and I'll just kind of show you an example. So the way we've built it into this demo app is it's in the system. Okay. I'm creating it, I'm printing it, I'm sending it. And then on the approval step, when I go edit that record, I'm doing it within the system. My users are doing it within here. And let's say there was no approved by, I'm coming in here, clicking a drop-down list and saying, I'm this person and I'm approving it on this date. Okay, that's one way of doing it. Well, what if I'm an approver? I am an approver of projects. How do I even know that there's a project for me to approve? Okay. There's two ways that we would typically implement that. One would be through dashboards. So for example, every time I, as an approver, log into my QuickBase or open up this dashboard, maybe I've got a workflow management dashboard where I see all of those projects that are waiting for approval. If it's 0, I've got nothing to do. If it's 1 or 5 or 10, I click through there and those are the ones that are waiting for me. Okay, that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it would be to build in to that proposals table or that proposals process a notification. Okay. Behind the scenes of this table, I can actually go build out notifications. And in that notification structure, I can say, I'm going to create a new notification email, and it's a notification, and I want to be notified when something is ready for approval. Okay. And who do I want to notify? Well, I want to notify certain, I could notify me, a specific list of users, people with a certain role, permissions, etc. I can do it when something is added, changed, or deleted. I can then say, here's the subject line, waiting for your approval. Okay. And then my question is, well, what are the criteria, if any, that have to be true before that email will go out? Okay. Well, I can build in additional criteria and filters to say, okay, I only want to get this notification when a certain field changes, like the proposal date. Okay. Or um, um, when a box is checked that says it's ready to send or ready to approve. So and I can build in those filters and that criteria that has to get met. Because, quite frankly, none of us wants a whole bunch of emails if we don't have to get an email. So we want to limit those emails to only certain things that fit certain criteria. But the bottom line is I could either build in a notification that it real time, as something is triggered and ready for my approval, I can build in a notification. Or what sometimes people will do instead of a notification real time is they will instead go into the notification type of area. And instead of a notification, maybe what they want to get instead is a subscription to a report. Okay. In other words, what if we built a report that shows all the projects ready for approval? Well, what I might want to do is subscribe to that report that gets sent to me either daily or weekly or whatever frequency you want. So I'm not getting a whole bunch of emails, but instead I'm getting one email that says, here's all the projects that are ready for approval. And you can do that type of thing too.
Okay. Tim said thanks. He had to, they called his flight, so he had to go.
All right.
As of just a few minutes ago. Anybody have any other questions?
Is anybody wondering how much this stuff costs?
I was thinking of asking that question. I got one other before that.
No, I'm talking to you, not him.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Yes. So I was curious, like what's your average or your range on how much to implement?
Yeah, that's always the next question when somebody says, "Hey, this sounds pretty darn good." Okay, now what's it going to cost me? So what I'm going to give you is kind of like those high level kind of numbers. Okay, so in terms of QuickBase pricing, there's the platform that you get, right? And then there's the development of the actual solution. So I want you to think of those as two different buckets of money or two different buckets of dollars that you might spend. One is the platform cost, the other is the development cost. The platform cost is this stuff here at the top. So at the smallest level with a direct account with QuickBase, it's targeting 20 users and up. On average, it's at $42 a user per month. So that $8,400 a year is the low end of the platform for what's called the Teams account. So just like every program out there, right? There's different tiers of what you get and things like that. The minimum is 20 users, roughly $8,400 a year. And that's if you have a direct account with QuickBase. And I'm using the word direct account with QuickBase because we're also a reseller of the platform. And so some companies aren't quite ready for that 20 minimum user. A lot of companies are, right? You may be you might have 300 users, and that's totally fine too. But since we work with a lot of smaller businesses as well, ones that are also continuing to use QuickBooks oftentimes, sometimes we might be working with a client that only has 5 users, okay, or 3 users or 10. So basically, we have small team accounts that allow people with as few users as 2 to be on the platform. And so our cost at that very, very lowest minimum is like $1,900 a year, and that's for 2 users. And what you get, again, that's the platform. Okay. On that platform, you can then go build a solution or build any number of solutions on there. And so our team does that. We have literally expert certified builders, and that's all they do is go build solutions all day long. We charge $175 an hour for that development. And what that ultimately translates into is a development price range depending on what you're trying to do. Okay. So what I've done is I've just kind of looked at a lot of the different projects that we do, and I kind of put them into 3 buckets. There's a small bucket, there's a medium bucket, and a large bucket. Okay. And again, all those things are relative. Like my small to you or my large to you might be like, huh, that's nothing. We spend 100 times that every single year. Okay. So just know that that's relative, right? I would say the smallest development projects that we do are in that 5 to 10,000 range. That's like pretty small. A very basic CRM system, for example, a very basic HR information system might be in that 5 to 10,000 range. I would say the bulk of the projects that we do are more in that middle range. So we're talking $10,000 to $25,000 of development. Large size, 25, 100,000. Obviously, just like any program, you can spend a lot more money. We've got clients that we've been working with for 5, 10 years, and we're continuing to develop as the company adapts. We're continuing to maintain those apps. And so, yeah, maybe it's 25,000, maybe it's 100, it could be a lot more depending on the complexity of what you're trying to do. But if you're just looking for some ballparks, think of the platform as, let's say, anywhere from anywhere from 2 to 8 or $9,000 a year, and the development middle of the road, $15,000 to $20,000 is pretty typical. Okay. Well, I know we're almost out of time. Let me do this just to kind of wrap up, and then again, if anybody has more specific questions, you can reach out individually. Happy to have a chat, do a one-on-one demo. whatever you need. Just a little bit about us. We've been in business since 1999. We are a relatively small company, I think nationwide, but we're, 17-person staff. We're based out of South Houston, but we are truly experts at QuickBooks, accounting, and QuickBase. That's kind of our niche. That's what we do. We've got 6 certified expert builders on staff, and that's all they do all day long is build solutions. We're one of the top 10 QuickBase solution providers in the country. We've built thousands of apps, clients in every imaginable industry, and we also are experts at integrating the two. So that's what we do. We got clients all over the place. And if you ever want to reach out to us for more information, a quote, proposal, or just to talk about the challenge that you're dealing with in your business, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is on the screen, Brad at VARC Solutions, or you can give us a call and we'd be happy to chat. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.